extent on issues that matter to society, that matter here and now.
Hi, my name is Jaidir. Initially, I was just going to complain that the daily crossword has become impossibly difficult. If perforce we are going to expand the definition of media, whether we like it or not, to include everybody with a WhatsApp connection, does it also not behoove us to look at the definition of news in the context of how this younger generation would like to consume it, given classical media is still talking about news as views, you're talking about nuance and you're talking about explanation. Isn't the younger generation, which is so digitally savvy, not saying just give us the facts, we will do the analysis for ourselves? Thank you so much.
Yes, there's also data journalism, and I think it's quite complex, very nuanced. How to read the numbers, COVID deaths, for example. It's not what is a COVID death or COVID-related death. It's not such an easy question to answer, because there could be complications and so on. But yes, news doesn't come just from reputable or established news organizations or media organizations, news media organizations, but the distinction I would make is between the professional producers of news, where certain standards are, as in law. Unfortunately, journalism is not quite as much a profession as the well-known professions, the law or accounting or medicine and so on, where there is self-regulation. There is a clear body to have self-regulation. It's not so clear in journalism. But having said that, increasingly news organizations, good ones, are putting in place standards, codes of ethics, codes of professional practice, including methodological questions. How, if I'm going to publish an allegation or something very derogatory, am I not obliged to talk to the other side in advance? There are cases where you may not, because for very specific reasons. But as a general rule, am I required or not required to, if I'm going to write against you something damaging to your organization or your personal reputation, am I not obliged, not only ethically but also professionally, to get in touch with you and get your side? I may be convinced you're right and drop my story or allegation. I may not be convinced by you, but I may want to give you a fair chance so the reader can see your version also in print or on the air and so on. These do not apply to the other stuff, the other guys who produce so-called news. And that distinction, I think, must increasingly be brought to the fore. And you are getting it in the time of COVID-19, where I think several news organizations, in my opinion, have done excellent work. In India also, not just because they have the expertise, but by repeatedly inviting people, expert. What is herd immunity? How long does immunity last? What happens during the time of Omicron? What happens with this evolution of the virus? What's going to happen next year? Are we seeing the end of the era of lockdowns, which young people hate, incidentally? Young people have a legitimate reason for saying that, why should I suffer? I'm not vulnerable. But you say because there are older people, my grandparents at home or some elderly relative at home, I've got to give up everything and stay at home. These are, I discussed with, it was Venki Ramakrishnan, our Nobel laureate, who first put this idea in my mind. And we were having a chat. And we just said, young people are saying they're selfish. They're just eager to go out and party and all that. But he then said, it's a legitimate question. You've got to answer seriously. So I think these things have to be brought in the discussion, and only professional news media, apart from experts, scholars, ethicists, and so on, will be able to do the job. The lay person will not even think along these lines. They may have the gift intellectually, but they're not trained to think like that. So anything to come to mind, they put it on Twitter against, particularly women journalists in India who had a terrible time. Rana Ayub, for example, rape threats. she's gone public about it, and several other women journalists in India. So only professional news media will not do it. If some of them do it, then I would call them rogue media, rogue professional media. But by and large, that distinction, I think, is valid, and we have to increasingly bring it to the fore and drill it in the minds of young people, that you need professional journalism and expertise also to be able to consume news or use news for the reasons that I mentioned here. The way that is perfectly legitimate. The research findings, how people relate to news, is fine, except those who want to completely switch away. That's their business, but I won't have the same respect for them, because then they shrink into their own shells and their own perhaps even selfish interests, totally individualistic, not caring about society, and so on. That's my judgment. You may disagree with it, but these are things where I think professional journalism and professional news media can make the world of difference.
I think we will wind up the Q&A now, Shiv, because
we're all out of time.
we're running out of time. Yeah, thank you so much. Please do accept a small memento from Koti Kapoor Madasi. Over to the Secretary's announcement, Retired Mahesh Pattabhirandan.
Next week, we have Tamil comedian and theatre artist Mr. O.G. Mahendran as special guest speaker, and it is going to be an espresso interaction session with our own Rotarian V.A. Ramash. And please join us in large numbers. It is going to be a fun and laughter session with O.G. Mahendran. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Mahesh. May I now request our Assistant Secretary, Rotarian Revati, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, President. Generations of us, especially those who grew up in the South, have become quite exceptional in our English, and I think we owe it to the Hindu. So I remember instances where, marks were low in English, and, you're sulking in a corner, your grandmother, your grandfather, your parents would be shouting from the behind. Hindu எவ்வளோ படிக்க சொன்னேன் படிக்காம இப்படி குறைச்சலா மார்க் வாங்கியிருக்கேன். So I think we owe Hindu quite a bit since its inception in 1878. It's a long journey for them, and many generations owe their thanks to them. So you honor us for the second time with your visit to the club. Your first visit, if I'm not wrong, was during past President Ballu's year, and at that point we were 90 members strong. And I want to thank the President, the club admin team, for bringing us once again such an exceptional speaker. And today we stand at 180 members, and many of us had the pleasure of listening to you once again. Thank you, sir. And today's topic was quite interesting, and lots of take off from this. One of them is we have all had children who are glued on to their phones, and most of their information come from there. Most of their arguments also stem from there. And what we realize is their arguments are not baseless. What they pick up from the internet or what they pick up from the social media, they research further, and they form their opinion. And as opposed to what we did listening to the news. Our research came from the newspaper, but their research comes from multiple newspapers. And that's a good thing that we feel about the internet as a parent. And I want to thank B.V. Shivkumar for the exceptional moderation. I'm sure hours of reading and planning has gone into this. But can we expect any less from this counselor of substance? No, we cannot. And a heartfelt thanks to Crown Plaza and the staff present here for their never-ending service and support. Thank you very much. Last but not the least, I thank the members present here physically and on Zoom for attending in large numbers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rotary Revati. I request members to stay on for a group picture with our chief guest. This meeting of the Rotary Club of Madras East is now adjourned.